Please Don't Summon Demons with Your Children Part 2, When Being a Supportive Parent Goes Wrong. All of the kids are collected in Joel's room at this point, and they're terrified, but Meg eventually finds the courage to go downstairs and call her parents. Now, strangely enough, Meg noted that when she went to go turn off the faucets in the bathroom, the clock said 10 p.m. roughly. But when she went downstairs to call her parents on the phone, despite it only being like 30 minutes between that event and the next, the clocks downstairs said like 2 or 3 a.m. And then when she went back upstairs after calling her parents, the clock said 7 p.m. But luckily for Meg, she got a hold of her parents and they decided to come home early after hearing the urgency in her voice. But of course, as soon as they walked in the door, the radio was off, the furniture was just fine, just like they left it, and the only thing that appeared to be frazzled was the children. So after calming them down and sending them to bed, everything returned to normal. But that would be a weird place to stop the story. So Ed Warren continued to interview the family members and eventually got to the parents. He asked them all the routine questions. Did you experience anything? Have you heard anything? Did you experience anything weird or unusual? And of course the parents said no. It seemed like it was just relegated to the children, sadly. But they did make mention of a large tree that used to be outside of their bedroom window. This was a beautiful tree, home to many birds, and these birds would sing during all times of the day. And sadly, when they cut the tree down, the singing stopped with it, and the birds found somewhere else to live. And that was until recently, though, because as they started to recount the tale to Ed Warren, they started to realize that there was a bird that was singing outside of their window. But the strange thing is that birds don't sing outside of your window at night. Now, after Ed finished interviewing the parents, Sandy and Al, he went on to interview Joel, the oldest son, and Joel told a much more harrowing tale. So again, it was another great night out for the parents. They had actually taken their youngest daughter, Erin, with them this time, so the only two at home were Joel and his older sister, Meg. Now again, much like the first story, the two were just hanging out in the house, doing their own thing. Meg was laying in her bed, and all of a sudden she saw this purple, dark mist form in her room. And she had closed her eyes, but when she closed her eyes, she stated that she could still see through them. She clenched her fist, and it was as though something tried to pry them open. So she ran into Joel's room. Now Joel, who was sitting in there minding his own business, was alarmed when his sister came rushing into his room, because unbeknownst to her, Joel had been hearing things moving about downstairs again, and he decided it was just best not to investigate because he was safer in his room. But things started to get really bad in the house. Stuff started moving, faucets turned on, the temperature in the house got really warm, and there were deafening noises all over the house. So the kids had to make a decision. They could stay there and possibly be harmed by whatever was in that house, or they could make a run for it. They chose the latter. Meg had on her clothes, some PJs, and decided she was not going back into her room to change, so she put on some of Joel's stuff. Joel put on his sneakers, and they hauled ass. They ran as fast as they could to get out of that house. Now, it was 11 p.m. when the kids left the house, and they experienced no relief. There was not a moment of peace for them. As they started running away from the house, things got really tense. On the left side and left side only, it sounded like a barrage of birds just screeching, and they got louder and louder. And as they made it to a clearing, they noticed that there were dogs that were running, and they wanted to run along with them. But as they got closer to the dogs, they noticed that the dogs were running backwards, and it always felt like there was this ever-present force that was following them. But Joel, maybe perceptive on his own, realized that if they could get to the streetlight down the street, then they might be safe. But it was strange because as they started to run, even faster still, there was something holding them back. They could not get to that lamp regardless of what happened. But luckily for the kids, there was some unseen force that gave them the extra push they needed to get to that light. But as they got under the light, they had to make another decision. They could stay under the light that was quickly dimming and risk whatever it was back behind them, or they could make a run for the local college. So the kids, thinking very fast on their feet, decided that is exactly what they would do, is make a run for the college. Now, as they left the quickly dimming light, even more things started to happen. The birds, which were already loud already and shouldn't have been there, started to get even louder. Again, only from the left side. The dogs that they had heard running had started to do even weirder stuff, and eventually they managed to get to the college. Joel was in slightly better shape because he had on shoes when he left the house, but his sister, she was struggling. She ran out of the house with her bare feet and Joel's sweatpants on and maybe a top. And so she was sitting outside on some concrete steps. Joel went into the police station and asked them to call their parents. Now again, the parents were at a friend's house. They were having a good time, so they were not trying to be bothered with their two children. But them being called by the police and the urgency of it all, again, bought them to pick up their children, and the children and the parents went back home. And that's how we get to the current point. Now, at this point, Lorraine has finished her investigation of the house. So once Lorraine finishes her investigation, she comes downstairs and her and Ed start to communicate with the family. Lorraine tells them, yes, there is something definitely in your house, and it is not a human spirit. Basically, it's something very malevolent. And Ed is like, all right, I know what you guys need to do. You're going to have to get out for the afternoon. I got to stay here and cleanse your house. What I need you to do while you're gone is not think of anything going on here. I need you to clear your mind, be in a positive headspace, and just get as far away from here as possible for at least a couple of hours. So after that happened, Ed and Lorraine would go room to room to room and bless the house. They did what was called a binding. And basically they would take a religious relic that they had, and exorcist blessed holy water, which is different than regular holy water, and they would bless each room in the house. And there was only one of two things that the thing in the house could do. It would either be banished or it would show itself. So they did this to all of the rooms. And then they get to Meg's room. And they do the binding on Meg's room. And the thing manifests itself. And Ed binds it. Now the problem with binding is that binding is binding, right? It's not banishment, it's binding. Ed is not a priest. He's pretty powerful though. But the thing is successfully bound, thankfully. But while Ed is in the room, he takes all of Meg's books, which, by the way, she had amassed a small collection thanks to Mommy, and he takes them, puts them downstairs, and the family comes back in at that moment. So Ed tells the family exactly what he's done and how he's bound the spirit, this inhuman spirit, and how it will lie dormant so long as the family's emotional state is in good standing. So they need to get out, go to church, make sure they're staying happy and healthy and that the environment remains positive. Otherwise, that binding can become undone. He also recommends that they go to the local priest and gets him to bless the house a couple of times and make sure everything stays intact. And basically, he sets the stack of books on the table that belong to Meg and says, look, these things are always going to be able to come back if you allow them. You need to get rid of these things. And that's the end of the story. And luckily, presumably, the family never experienced anything else. So the moral of this story is be careful what you play with. If you're not experienced in whatever it is, please do not attempt it. Leave it to the experts. There are plenty of them out there. And of course, always protect yourself and your space. But anyways, you know what you guys thought of this story. Have you heard it before? Are you interested in hearing anything else from this novel? And I will see you guys in my next video.